It appears that thousands of Americans are looking at the possibility of being evicted as states begin to lift moratoriums on evictions that have been in place since the start of the pandemic. So now this pandemic, it's not over. Coronavirus, we're looking at the possibility of a second wave, and second wave coming soon. And yet the federal government, aside from a $1,200 check and some unemployment benefits, is not really there. Yes, there are some other temporary measures that were in the CARES Act that did help. There was, of course, a moratorium on evictions. That doesn't mean that rent isn't still due. That means that you can't be evicted until a certain time. Well, that time's about to run out. And so if you're one of those people that were not able to get unemployment benefits and didn't get a $1,200 check, or you did, and you spend it on a month's rent and then you don't have any more money, well, you're one of the people that could be facing eviction very, very soon. And that's, of course, a disaster. Right now, 24 states have begun processing evictions again. And by the end of June, it's expected to hit about 30. So now, not all renters are vulnerable, although nearly 30% continue to be protected by a federal moratorium under the CARES Act, but other people are not so lucky. The rest of those live in properties that are either not subsidized by the federal government, and so therefore they're not. It doesn't apply to them, or are owned by landlords with loans that are not federally backed, which again are not taken care of. For these unprotected renters, the threat of eviction is incredibly real, especially those who are at the bottom of the economic ladder. And of course, this disproportionately impacts Black and Hispanic Americans. And so, of course, this is a massive disaster. You have millions of workers that are still out of work. You have an unemployment rate that's a real unemployment rate that is somewhere around 20%, and an economy that, even though the stock market is doing very well, strangely well, and you had an addition of 2.5 million jobs, and everybody's crowing about the jobs report, that doesn't mean that the economy isn't on shaky grounds. And so this is not good. Now, according to Diane Yentl, president and CEO of the National Low Income Housing Coalition, says back rent is becoming due, and renters are no more able to pay it now than they were at the beginning of the crisis. Again, because even though you have states that have opened up, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's ready to get back to business, that everybody's ready to go back to sitting in restaurants and visiting movie theaters, as we have a pandemic that is still ongoing. And in fact, now we've seen, especially since Memorial Day weekend, a spike in cases all over the country in places that have opened up. And so this pandemic is far from over, and yet these very meager protections, on this show, I've been calling for a complete moratorium on both rents and mortgages so that people do not have to pay them until the end of this, as well as a $2,000 a month UBI. We've got none of those things. And so now we are facing a crisis that is essentially man-made. It is not going to go well. It's going to go very badly. Yentl says we are very concerned about a wave of evictions and a spike in homelessness unless there's some sort of federal intervention. And I'm sorry to say, but that is not going to happen. Mitch McConnell is not interested at all in making sure that people can remain in their homes, in sending any sort of federal help. Now, the Democrats have passed the HEROES Act, right, which would at least help somewhat. It would give at least another $1,200 injection, cash injection into everybody's pocket. That's always good. It's always kind of a strange thing calling it cash injection. It's just a check. Nonetheless, that still isn't enough. It isn't enough. Now, the HEROES Act also does call for $100 billion in emergency rental assistance, and that's good. But I think we need to go further, because this is the problem, right? We have one eviction every 7 minutes. And this is happening before the coronavirus, pandemic had taken the country. And so what you have in this country is a lot of people ending up on the street, not being able to afford their homes. Rents are sky high. The rent is too damn high. And we just don't have enough income. And now with the economy the way that it has gotten even worse. It's just gotten even worse. And of course, it's been terrible for Black and brown people all over the country. In fact, Eliza Durana, narrative change liaison with the eviction lab at Princeton, noted that the heaviest concentrations of eviction were in the South and in the Rust Belt. According to Eviction Lab, South Carolina has the highest eviction rate in the country. The city of Charleston alone evicts more people each month than in some states. And so that's disastrous in this area. And again, most of the people that are impacted by this are minorities. So it's disastrous. I mean, look, what we need to do, as I said before, is actually do something about this. We need a stimulus. Mitch McConnell says, no, we're not going to look at that until even July. And there is no guarantee that he'll even pass anything. Now, as I reported before, he's taking a little bit of a risk. Politico reported this. And they said, look, yes, we're taking a risk by not actually taking this up. We want to see, how the money is spent and if it has an impact on the economy. And we just want to wait, right? We don't want to spend any more money. We're quote unquote worried about the national debt. Well, if they were really worried about the national debt, they wouldn't have passed trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the rich. And the CARES Act wouldn't have actually given trillions of dollars to corporations that could be leveraged several times by the Federal Reserve. So if you're worried about that, man, I got news for you of what they're doing with the banks right now in the Fed. They're giving them trillions of dollars in loans for liquidity. And so it is, look, it's not something that we should be worrying about. I doubt Mitch McConnell actually worries about the national debt. In reality, he doesn't want to give people more money. And that's it. He wants everybody to go back to work. And he wants the stock market to remain strong. That's why they're holding off. Notice how when the stock market tumbled, made a huge, huge fall at the beginning of this crisis, that's when Republicans were on every single spending bill. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Let's pump more money into the economy. Okay, sure, we'll give you some crumbs. But our main goal is to help corporations and to help the rich. And that's exactly what they did. Now the stock market, again, is stable and actually doing well. They're entering what they call a bull market. Well, now that we've helped the rich, we don't really need to help anybody else. You guys are on your own, so enjoy your evictions, enjoy not being able to pay your bills, and all that. And so, again, Joel Roberts here, he's the chief executive at PATH, an LA organization that serves homeless populations. He says that with unemployment around 15%, homelessness is predicted to increase by 250,000 people. And that's just, of course, in the country. Well, that's in the country alone. And so that's disastrous. That's just with 15%. Again, real unemployment is at 20%. And we're not at the end of this crisis. We're just starting on we're not even done with the first wave. What's going to happen with the second wave when it becomes even more disastrous? As this economic, recession begins to really sink in. We need relief. We need to do it now. And unfortunately, we don't have a government that works for us. And that's going to lead to a lot of suffering. It's going to lead to a lot of people on the street at a time where, there's no good time to have people on the streets. But during a pandemic, that's probably even the worst time. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.